If you want to ride faster, then keep watching, because in this video, I'm going to show you a structured approach to tailor your high intensity interval training sessions intelligently to make you faster in just a few weeks. But I'm not only going to show you the prescriptions and leave you hanging. I'm going to show you how to do it down to the intensity, sets, reps, and details on how to conduct the sessions, so you really understand how to get the best out of the science and yourself. Let's start here. Say you want to try any number of the studies that have been done so far. You have to be careful of one important thing. And I say this is the number one thing to watch out for. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's say you read Ronstadt. Imagine you're this person here. Or here's an even better one. Say you want to try Billat's 30-30s. Imagine you're subject 4. Well, that would kind of suck. But my point here is the one important thing is don't forget to add individual response into your training process, as there might always be a better way to do things. Well, how do I do that, Damien? It's fine in the lab with precise measurement of VO2, but what about everybody else? Here's the good news. Without a way to measure real-time VO2, no one metric alone can accurately predict it. So the best approach to optimizing your own VO2 max workouts on a daily basis is to consider power, heart rate, and RPE, rating of perceived exertion, together. This triangulation of metrics, known as the Holy Trinity, well, I just made that. No one calls it that. But it can help you estimate how close you are to reaching maximal effort during a HIIT interval. If power is barely sustainable, heart rate reaches near HR max, and the rating of perceived exertion is about 9 out of 10, chances are that you are close to reaching your VO2 max. As far as what exact durations and intensity to ride at, here it is. You ready? You sure? Pay attention, because you don't want to miss it. Okay, here it is. Based on my interpretation of the literature, my opinion is that as long as the high-intensity interval trainings are performed entirely above FTP, CP, and the total weekly, monthly training volume is sufficient to challenge your current capabilities, the specific prescription details of an individual workout matter less. You may not be satisfied with that, but it's a good starting point, and I will give you some sample sessions at the end, but I want to make note that there are other physiological variables to be considered. I really like the framework developed by Paul Larson and Martin Bouchette in their 2013 two-part review of high-intensity interval training, in which they created an evidence-based framework that helps coaches and self-coached riders to use different interval modalities to target the 3 metabolic processes, the neuromuscular load and the musculoskeletal strain. This framework covers more than just HIIT that we've been talking about in this video, as they came up with 5 combinations that target these 3 systems with varying and increasing demands. Simply called Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, Type 4, and Type 5, interval sessions can be built where it has components of aerobic and neuromuscular, or aerobic and anaerobic, or aerobic, anaerobic, and neuromuscular. Now, if this sounds like a metric beep ton of possible combinations, you would be right. And when Jeremy Brion simulated the number of possible HIIT training sessions from this framework for his master's project, he came up with 6,198. And I'd go through all of them, but I don't think we have time for that. But we will go over these in the next section where it'll be easier to demonstrate. So now we get into the strategic decisions of what sessions to prescribe or do. And this process starts with your prioritized adaptations. This starts with looking at the race or event scenarios where a certain performance is needed. And when it comes down to it, the key targets we are training with these intervals are to increase either your anaerobic metabolic power and capacity, neuromuscular recruitment and economy, or max aerobic power. The cool thing in the Larson and Bouchette framework is that they give you 4 interval formats to elicit these adaptations in each of their 5 combinations. In other words, interval formats can either be short intervals, long intervals, repeated sprint training, sprint interval training, and each of these formats elicit different adaptations. Let's go through an example. If I was targeting the 3 key targets, type 4 is the preferred type with high adaptations for all 3 systems, aerobic, anaerobic, and neuromuscular. And there is a warning with type 4 intervals. These hit all 3 energy systems at once, therefore are very fatiguing. So I have to use them sparingly, only once or maybe twice a week. So basically though, we are looking at choosing between short HIIT, long HIIT, and repeated sprint training formats linked to type 4. And really, don't be afraid to mix it up here, because there is no one session that needs to be the only session you do forever. But okay, we're getting there. We've now got our targets, our interval types, and now we just have to adjust the interval variables or manipulations of the interval before getting to the final session format. And it's important to remember when fine-tuning your session format, there is no one magic workout, but there are some that work better than others. And this is why it's important to monitor athletes and work with a format that suits them to get the best out of them. For example, rider type plays a part here because not only does the underlying muscle fiber typology dictate the ideal starting point, the mental game also plays a pretty big part in this stuff. As you can see here, within all interval formats, there are many manipulations that can be made. But here's where I would start. I prefer longer HIIT bouts with intervals greater than 4 minutes, and these are hard at an intensity above our maximum metabolic threshold, critical power, but not maximal to failure. As long as we are working within this severe intensity domain, we don't need to maximize intensity. Instead, we should be aiming to extend the duration of each interval or bout. And the duration we spend within this intensity domain appears to be the most effective to improve both performance and general fitness outcomes. Furthermore, and pay attention here because the rest intervals are brief and it's 2-to-1 work-rest ratio. In the first 5-minute repetition, it's maximal, and you should be aiming to find the highest workload that you can sustain for the full workout duration without needing to reduce your power output, and which doesn't end up as a maximal effort by the end. And remember, we are optimizing for consistency across workouts here, not trying to maximize any single interval. In a 8-week build block with recovery weeks 4 and 8, but of course, like everything else, the expectation is that we should change and adapt to the specifics to suit your own requirements. You may reach a plateau earlier or later, or you'll need recovery weeks more often or less often, or if you progress with the workout and you're adding minutes every time you get on, or maybe you need to do the same sessions over and over again for 3 or 4 weeks. You get the idea here. There is flexibility in this programming. But say we do want to plan something. We want 15 to 25 minutes of total intensity time. We want rest of 2-to-1, work to rest ratios, and aerobic recovery, so you are spinning the legs. The intensity is, like I said before, 9 out of 10. It's hard but sustainable. You feel like you could do one more if you had to. Now, the progression is 4x4, 3x6, and then 4x5, 4x6, and some coaching notes to help you get through this. Go all out, but in reality, this will mean 8 to 9 out of 10 effort at this duration. So aim to maintain that relative effort during the entire work duration and across intervals. And that probably means power will start much higher for the first interval when you're fresh and then decrease through each interval and through the workout as you fatigue. This is really where you start to triangulate with your heart rate. If your heart rate isn't reaching 90% of your maximum heart rate during these intervals, but your power output is above your critical power and you feel like you're putting in that RPE of 8 to 9 out of 10, it could indicate that you're carrying too much fatigue in this interval or the sessions, and you won't be able to reach that 90% of your VO2 max. And it's important to note that there is a lot of individual variability in heart rate. So 90% of heart rate max is a general guideline rather than a strict target. And to stress the system even more, try and ride at a higher cadence. And I'm talking 110 RPM. And this one is a tough one, and maybe you need to work up to it. But the thing with these intervals is that they aren't meant to look pretty like your sub-threshold intervals. Bob, nod, sway your way through them. And that includes high cadence. Now, there are other variants you can throw onto this, like when prescribing longer, say 5-minute intervals, you can do a fast start or you can do variable speed intervals. Really, Anytime you add variety to complexity, these hard start or even the Ronstadt 30-15 intervals, over-unders, heat training, cadence drills, and all the rest, it's better to keep things simple, in my opinion. There's a certain art to getting these right, and you have to drive them to make sure each session is the most effective session. So once you can get through that, then sure, go ahead and experiment. This area of training lacks concrete evidence for optimal HIIT sessions, but frameworks like that of Larson and Buett provide a structured approach to tailor your training intelligently. And when prescribing sessions for yourself or others, it's crucial to have a multifaceted approach that considers metabolic, neuromuscular, and psychological aspects. There is no one-size-fits-all, but with meticulous design and monitoring, you can optimize your performance perfectly. Mwah.